group coaching program, which is a series of workshops, a 90-minute, almost like a webinar, but I have like a thing about webinars. Please don't do webinars, is my personal opinion. I'm being a little facetious. There are a good place for webinars, but help people do things. And so do a workshop instead.
You're listening to the 7-Figure Leap podcast. We're here to leverage rich relationships and smart strategies to take your business to the next level. Here's your host, Dustin Rieckman.
How do you create a world-class workshop that your clients love and you love to deliver? That's what we're going to answer today with a good friend of mine, a client of mine, Jake Wysocki. This is his whole specialty, is helping people create these world-class workshops. This could be group coaching. It could be an introductory workshop. It could be a corporate workshop. But he's got a really interesting background in how to do this well. And he's been helping me and other people in our community do this at a high level. So I was really excited for the opportunity to have Jake come on today, show us some of his secrets, instruct us on how to do this so we can grow our coaching and consulting businesses in a smart way. So Jake, I'm super grateful that you're here. I'd love to just give the mic over to you for a few minutes here, let you give a little context, give us your background, and then we'll dive into your business and we'll get into teaching people how to create these world-class workshops.
Perfect. Thanks, Dustin. Excited to be here. And buckle up, everybody. Dustin just gave me the mic. And you know what happens when you give me the mic? I can just go and go, but I'll keep it contained for you, Dustin. So a little bit about how I got here. I actually started sort of similar to you in engineering, although I'm mechanical, if I remember correctly. You're civil.
Yes, you're much smarter than me is what that means to me. So,
well, I don't know, but then I'm less smart than the aeronautical engineers and the nuclear engineers. So, we all have our own, I suppose. But I never went into engineering itself proper. I have more of an engineering mindset, but I went into sales out of school. And I always like to mention this because I kind of like to brag about it. I'm really proud of it. But then I quit my job and my wife and I traveled for a year. We came back. I actually came back to the same Fortune 200 company kind of by chance, but in a different role, in a product development role. So I was kind of an entrepreneur almost. I didn't realize that at the time, but looking back, that's what it was. And that's where I got in touch with the design thinking team at my company. And design thinking, for those of you who don't know, is actually like a capital D designer's mindset and toolkit applied typically by non-capital D designers. So what do I mean by mindset and toolkit? So the mindset is human-centric. So thinking about the humans on the other end of whatever you're designing. And the toolkit is usually represented by the sticky note, which I know you love, Dustin.
I do love, yes.
Yeah, you've been running your business off of sticky notes, I hear, for quite a while until relatively recently. But structured exercises often with sticky notes, but it doesn't have to be. That's kind of the representation of them. And so what I love about design thinking is it's the mixing of this process, this system mindset that I have, and the human element of things. And I think that makes a really nice mix. And so anyway, I came in contact with this team in that role, and then I eventually joined that team to then train other people in the company. Our primary role was training other people in the company to do design thinking in their own roles. And also, we did facilitation kind of for hire for the leadership teams or special projects or something like that, where I would design and deliver workshops for a specific purpose, besides all the other training, which was in its own way a workshop too, by the way. So it's kind of workshops all the way down for me. Maybe everything just looks like a nail because I have this awesome hammer of design thinking. But so that was my corporate work. And if you want to pull the thread on why I left, we can pull that. But really, ultimately, it came down to I just want to try something new. I loved my job. I actually had a conversation yesterday with my old boss, had a great time. And in 2024, beginning of 2024, I started my own business. I left the company and started my own business. And this is actually, this phase of my business is when I met you. And again, I'll keep this short, but I was originally helping people with life design, helping millennial parents live regret-free through life design. So workshops that I developed for my wife and I, we call them State of the Unions, to like think big picture about our life. I wanted to help other people do that too. And when I met you, I had this like sort of existential crisis where I'm like, well, I love doing this. I love helping people with this, but I'm also feeling called to helping people develop awesome workshops because I had some incoming inquiries, if you will, from people who met me along the way and said, I know your background and I need help with a workshop. Can you help me? So I'm just helping these people on the side. And long story short, I joined your accelerator. It was a great accelerator. And in the middle of it, instead of podcast guesting, although I did some of that too, I actually pivoted my business. So that's not really the promise that you gave, but that was the help I needed, right? And so now, fast forward to today, I'm helping people build and deliver world-class workshops.
I love it. That's great. Yeah, that's not uncommon. I think in our world, podcast guesting is the thing. It's the hook. And the truth is, to do that well, it requires a lot of clarity. And so a lot of times people don't realize they're actually pretty unclear on who they want to serve or what they want to talk about or what their core messaging is. And many times that's the big unlock. And then the podcast guesting sort of flows naturally from there. I actually viscerally remember our first conversation after you signed up, because I usually do them on Zoom, and we had this one-on-one call scheduled. And for whatever reason, I was like, I got to be outside the house. And I remember being on this long walk with Jake, and it was raining, and you were telling me about your family history, and it was very emotional, actually. And you were talking about this sort of tug of war of ideas of like, I really care about this, and I really care about this, and which one should come first. And so it's really been awesome in the ensuing 18 months to see you find the right path and go all in on this world-class workshops as the thing you're doing. Again, you've helped me with it. You've helped a lot of previous guests on this show with it. I think one thing that'd be helpful, and you sort of alluded to this, help me define workshop. And realizing our audience is primarily entrepreneurs, coaches, consultants, agency owners. I think some of us think of, is that in person, online? Is it 2 people? Is it 100 people? Like, you define it pretty loosely, but at the same time, very intentionally. So what's a workshop, Jake?
Yeah. So the way that I define a workshop is when you're trying to use a intentional structure to take someone from point A to point B. And I actually recently came across this analogy. I love my analogies, and I'm going to use it again here. To me, it's kind of like the Americanized Mexican food that you see, where the ingredients are more or less kind of all the same. It's just a different packaging, right? And so for me, workshops, like you mentioned at the top, group coaching programs, that's actually kind of what I originally pivoted to, but I've recently kind of widened the aperture just a little bit because it represented more what I was actually being like helping people with. But so group coaching program, which is a series of workshops, a 90-minute, almost like a webinar, but I have like a thing about webinars. Please don't do webinars, is my personal opinion. I'm being a little facetious. There are a good place for webinars, but help people do things. And so do a workshop instead. So that's a workshop. In-person retreat could be a workshop. You should be doing some of these exercises to help people think deeply about their deeper purpose in their meeting and where they want to go in their business or whatever. So all those things are workshops in my mind. And they all have the same ingredients. So the process I follow applies to all of them with maybe some very minor nuances.
Okay. And I think if we're going to get into the framework and the mechanics of how to do this well, of course, but just sort of setting the stage for what is and isn't a workshop. It sounds like one of the big differentiators here is they're outcome based. Like we're driving towards a result, whereas like a quote unquote webinar that's all fluffy and pie in the sky and actually doesn't drive any result would not qualify as a workshop. A webinar done well that's driving people to an outcome could be a workshop. But is that one of the big differentiators then?
For me, the difference, just to get on my soapbox for a minute, thanks for teeing it up. I love a soapbox for webinars, is originally came from the word seminar on the web. And a seminar is talking at people. I'm a big fan of get people to do as fast as possible because that's the best way to actually help them transform, to take the next step, to learn. The best learning, I mean, how many books have you read and never done anything with? And so it's almost like, sure, maybe there's some like residue in my brain about this thing I read about, but if you're not actually applying what you're learning, you're getting very little value. So that's why I'm really big on get people to do something. So maybe you actually help me unlock the better answer, which is workshops actually take people through doing something to get to point B from point A. And I'll also highlight the thing that you mentioned with outcome based. So the 3 main ingredients I use to like high level ingredients to design a workshop, a world-class workshop, are 2 types of outcomes and an identity. And so the outcomes are for you, like if you were my client, Dustin, I would be asking you, what do you want this workshop to do for your business? And then what do your clients want it to do for them and their business or their whatever, right? In your case, it'd be business. Those 2 things are usually aligned, but they may seem misaligned, on the face of it. You might be trying to scale from one-on-one to many or few or however you want to phrase it. And so you're thinking, I need to reduce my time, but that may be in conflict a little bit with delivering an awesome experience. So it just holds those 2 things in tension and also helps me helping you design a great experience. That third thing, which is identity, is like the feeling. It's kind of this like human X factor, if you will, of like, what does my program or my workshop feel like? And essentially it boils down to 3 adjectives. So maybe it's guided, it's fun, and it's inspirational or something like that, right? And then all 3 of these things combined act as filters so that you can use, or I can use, to design a great workshop.
Okay. That's super useful. Like the intent was really to define workshop, but we're already getting into what makes it an effective workshop and, what are the considerations. So we're going to spend almost the rest of our time picking your brain and getting your framework so that people can go create a world-class workshop. Before we do that, I don't want to lose sight of your own business. One of the things I think I like, and therefore I'm assuming the audience likes, is they like to kind of have a peek inside what other people are doing in their businesses. So tell us a little bit now about your offers and who you like to work with, because there's a lot of ways to do design thinking and apply it to workshops. So there's certain types of clients you like to work with and certain formats that you personally prefer.
Yeah, this is perfect timing. So I mentioned I recently did like that very mild pivot to workshops over group coaching programs, and it brought to mind all these existential questions. So this is a little bit in flux as of this moment, but my ideal client is typically someone who's an established expert who already has one-on-one clients and already has a business, and they want to either start a new offer of their own through some kind of workshop, whether it's a new, we'll call it lead magnet, if you will, or an attract offer like Hormozy would talk about, or maybe a group coaching program or something new, or they have something that's not working and they're considering abandoning it, or they're frustrated about it. And I can help them diagnose what's going on and help them decide, is this actually not working for your business? Or is it something fundamental to like the way you're doing the workshop that could improve that outcome that you want for your business, which is probably what you're frustrated about, if we can find a better way to do that. So that's what I help people do. I'll save the framework, the 10, 50, 99. I'll dangle that here. But I work kind of in those stages, which I'll explain. But the center line that I try to help people with is what I call that 50%, which is a delivery guide. And I don't like this phrase, but a lot of people use it. It's like the run of show. It's like, here's exactly what you're going to be doing. Here's how you're going to say the important things that need to be said in a certain way. It's not a script, but it's like, here's the things, here's the timing, here's the exercises, here's why. And it's like the plan. You still at that level need to build your slides and other stuff. I don't always do that. I can. And I don't want to just stop at ideally the like the basics. I like to get in there with you and actually design the experience from start to finish so you know how to do a great job.
Okay. Awesome. So very much a done with you service with some done for you components, and you're deep diving with this expert based on some of the stuff you've already started to share to make it very custom to what what they want, what their client wants, what they want it to feel like. And so each of these would be a unique workshop at the end of the day. And you like to be their partner in delivering that, to designing and delivering that in the best case scenario. I captured that pretty good.
You did. Actually, that's perfect. And it makes me think of this concept that I've been writing about a little bit, which is like, don't just use someone's framework, or like a template, maybe is a better word for it. I can't just give you, Dustin, here's a podcast. Well, maybe if it's a podcast guesting, et cetera, template, maybe that would work because that's pretty specific. I don't think that exists. But maybe it's like an accelerator template. I can't just give you an accelerator template and then you just plug in your stuff. It's not that simple. Maybe that gets you 50% of the way there or something like that. But that's not going to get you to world class. You need and that's where design thinking I really love, because it's these ingredients, these Americanized Mexican food ingredients, if you will. But it's the combination and the specific way you actually apply them that makes that, for lack of a better word, that magic that is like a really, truly world-class experience.
Yeah, really makes it exceptional, impactful, memorable, all those things, which would probably be in my 3 adjectives if I was trying to design an experience like this.
Yes.
All right. Well, I think now would actually be a perfect time to dive into the framework. So I know it's 10, 50, 99 design framework. Pick that up wherever you want and either guide us through the framework and we can dive into sort of application of it or where people mess it up. But yeah, like educate us on this framework and why we should be looking at these world-class workshops through this lens and through this process that you've designed.
Perfect. Yeah. So let me get on another soapbox. Do not build your whole program before you sell it. Please don't. And this is where 10, 50, 99 comes in. So all you need to sell a program, a workshop, a retreat, or whatever is that 10% level. 10, 50, 99 roughly corresponds to percentage done. And this is all relative. You can like zoom in and then there's a 1059, or you can zoom out and there's a big 105099. But I'll put a little bit of structure on it for you. So let's just use a group coaching program or an accelerator program as an example. A 10% plan for a group coaching program. The 10% is the promise. So like, what are you actually promising people the transformation will be? And this is frankly really the only thing you actually need to sell, like to actually convince someone to buy it, because that's actually what they're buying. They're buying the promise of transformation. They're not buying a program. They're buying the thing that the program gives them. And so you need to be clear on that. And also really helps to have some of the basic structure mapped out. So, you as the person delivering it have confidence that, oh, this actually makes sense and it's not just completely made up. And so what that would be for a group program is like, here's my 8 sessions. I know I'm going to do 90 minutes a week. And then here's the topics for each week. And that's really it. That's really all you need at the 10% level. Now, there's some other things we could kind of define, but those are like the 2 big ones. And then obviously how much you're charging and other things like that. But from a program design perspective, that's the 10%. And that's enough to know, okay, this feels reasonable. I can see it coming together. I know I can adapt. And by the way, here's another soapbox. You don't need to tell anybody this anyway. I never share like, here's each week. Maybe if it's an established program and you really want to, but people don't care. At the end of the day, they don't care. They need to know when they show up and what you're giving them at the end of the program, which can be more than one promise. Maybe there's a few sub promises and there are sub outcomes that you're giving them. That's all they really need to know. And that's the 10%.
Okay. So 10%, we are ready to sell seats to the workshop. And again, workshop could mean a full group coaching program. It could be a one-off event. It could be an in-person experience. But you can sell tickets to this thing at the 10%. And it sounds like you think you should. Like basically a pre-sell where you've got enough of the structure to have a clear promise, to have a structure that people can commit to. That's 10%. Right?
Yes, because the alternative is building the whole thing before you even talk about it, or maybe you're even to, well, let's go extreme. Let's say you build the whole thing before you even talk about it, just to make this example really simple. I like to get nuanced, but let me just keep it simple. The problem is people may not ever buy it, and think about all that time you wasted. I mean, this is obvious in retrospect, but so many of us, and I've done this in the past too.
I've done it too.
Yes, I think we all have. But it's easy to forget that when you have like a new opportunity, like, oh, I need to get the slides and all this stuff. No, you don't, because people may never buy it. And then the sales process, by the way, which usually includes some form of research, whether it's explicitly like designed as research or just because you're talking to people, will help inform further what that program should be for when you actually need to deliver it. And you'll have time between selling it and actually delivering it that you don't need to have this stuff figured out. So like the 50 and the 99% level figured out ahead of time. So that's the 10%.
That's important. That sounds very critical. All right. Yeah. Let's move to 50% and what that means and where this enters the equation, what it looks like.
Yeah. So 50% is where it starts becoming more real. So for I'll actually zoom out from my group program for a second. For a general, any kind of workshop, it's delivery guide. So here's like that run of show, like I mentioned before.
Okay.
It's just to repeat one more time. It's like the timing. So it's like an agenda. It's like a detailed agenda, basically. But there's more details than just like, here's what we're doing. It's here's how we're doing it. Here's the materials I expect to need. It's like the whole plan. It's not necessarily ready for you to deliver, although an experienced facilitator probably could in a pinch. Like if I needed to, I could, instead of using slides or something, just talk at people or talk to people as I'm walking them through the exercise and tell them to write on a piece of paper. I don't need a workbook necessarily. Although maybe you want that even in a first run, that's also fine. So that's the 50%. Now with the group program, you're only doing the 50% for your first session about 2 weeks in advance. This is what I recommend. This is how I help my clients. So 2 weeks in advance, you're doing your 50%, your delivery guide about 2 weeks before you actually go live. And then the week of or the week before, that's when you're doing that 99% level. And so that 99% level is what I call deliver ready. And by the way, I picked 99 because it's not 100%, because you're never going to be 100%, nor should you be. That's perfection or perfectionism or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
And we're never going to be there. There's always things. So back in corporate, we did so many of these trainings over many years, and there was still like this laundry list of things we wanted to change. And it was super dialed in and it was awesome. And people loved it. People were like, this is the best training we've ever taken. And it was awesome, but there's still so many things you want to change. So you're never done and you're never trying to get done. You're just trying to get good enough, right? So really even 99 is probably too high, but I like the way it flows. So anyway, 99% is the delivery ready material, which is slides, maybe an online whiteboard, like a Miro board. It could be workbook. It could be knowing what you're going to do in person for like a flip chart page. Like what is my design going to be for the flip chart page? All those sorts of things. And critically, especially for your first delivery, a run through so you can make sure to massage that 50% plan, that delivery plan into something you feel confident about and you've kind of checked like your assumptions. Because even though I'm really experienced at this, whenever I run through a workshop, I'm like, oh, yeah, we need to get from that thing to that thing, and that doesn't work. So now I need to change this and change that. And it's not a huge deal. It's close. But if I didn't think about that, I'd be kind of scrambling in the moment and kind of thrown off. And it'll still be okay. But that's what you get to the 99.
Okay.
So to connect those dots real quick, if you're doing a group program, you're doing 50% 2 weeks before, 1 week before your first session. You're doing 99% for that and 50% for the next week, assuming it's the week after. And you do that in a rolling fashion. So you're still not building everything up front. You're just building like the next one coming up.
The benefit of that be, so I already know there's type A's listening and they're like, I get the 10% because, pre-selling makes sense, because if I build this whole thing and I try to sell it, no one buys it, that would be a huge waste of everyone's, time, money, and energy. But once people buy it and I already know I'm going to deliver it, why would I just lock myself in a closet for a weekend and build the whole thing so I don't have to piecemeal it? What's the benefit of doing it 1 week at a time effectively and sort of having this rolling 50% 99, 50% 99? Why do you prescribe that versus just getting it all done and having it ready to go?
Because it's going to change after your first session almost every time. So I'll give you an actual exercise that anybody listening can follow. It's called hopes and fears. This is my favorite way to start any session, and it kind of scales, and there's some nuance here, but I talk about it in my crash course, so we can talk about that later. But the hopes and fears at its core is asking people what they hope will happen with whatever the scope of your program or workshop is, and what do they fear about it. So in your case, Dustin, maybe it's what are you hopeful for, or what do you hope will happen with podcast guesting? And what are you nervous about, or what do you fear in doing podcast guesting? There's more sophisticated ways to ask similar questions, but that works totally fine. And what you're going to learn is what they actually need. This is the most important the first time you deliver any given workshop. It's still useful for each subsequent one, but for the first one. So one of your former accelerator attendees and podcast guests, Joe Mackay, was one of my clients, and he did this hopes and fears, and he came back and said, Jake, I'm freaking out. We need to change everything. And I have this huge weight on my head of all their hopes and fears that they're putting on me. Like, they're worried about their families and their livelihoods. And this is not what I was expecting. And we talked through it, and he said, you know what? I actually feel a lot better because now I actually know what they need and how I can actually help them. And it changed everything. So immediately he knew, okay, this thing I was going to talk about next week, which was probably something about LinkedIn or something like that. He said, we're going to do that later, if at all. Next week, we're going to focus on whatever. I forget what it was specifically, but their offers, or getting clear on like what their business foundations are, or something like that. And it made it really crystal clear what they needed to do. And because we didn't develop the whole thing, it wasn't a huge loss. It was really easy to pivot instead of feeling trapped in this sunk cost fallacy situation where, like, well, it's already developed and I don't want to do all that work. And this is really hard to change it. It's painful all around.
If I changed it, but I don't feel like taking that on. So instead, intentionally building it 1 week at a time so that you can respond to, iterate, pivot as needed based on each week's clarity that you're getting as you're delivering it. That makes a ton of sense. So hopes and fears specifically, like, how do you extract that information? Is that like on the sales call before they sign up? Is it in the first session? Is it the very first thing you talk about? Like, where does hopes and fears come into the process?
You can do it in any phase of the process. Let's just talk a workshop. This is basically like the warm-up. This could be an easy warm-up for any phase of the process, or any type of workshop, rather. Let's say it's a big workshop and you're doing like a 90-minute with 30 people or something. You can have people type it in the chat, and then you can see what they're saying. And that's like a really low key way to say it. And I would do it one at a time just to be really tactical about it. I'd say, what are everybody's hopes? And then you can kind of react to some of them, or maybe if you have time and want to spend the time, ask somebody to jump on and share briefly and interact with them that way. But you're understanding who's in the room and what they care about. And then you can do the fears after that, for example. And I mentioned before, this is really important for like the first time you do anything, any kind of workshop, but it's also still useful even if you have a pretty dialed in workshop, because I kind of think about like mind like water, like swaying in the wind or something like that, where you're not going to make a huge change like the example with Joe I gave after you have it pre-established. But you might be thinking, oh, okay, I'm going to emphasize this thing that came up versus that thing for the specific audience that you have. So that find it really useful regardless of how long you've been doing it.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. I'm thinking about how I can incorporate this. We've done 16 cohorts of the Podcast Profits Accelerator that Jake was part of, and frankly, through some of your feedback specifically, we've changed some things about the program as we've gone. It's definitely version 16 is completely different in many ways than version 1, and it's better than version 15. But I'm thinking about this like every kickoff call, so every new cohort, like everything's preloaded, predetermined as far as we know what we're going to cover each week. And it's a live experience and I'm leading it, right? And so calibrating the experience to that group is still really useful, because I would imagine there's sort of this, I don't know how this happens, but it tends to be I get a group of people and there's some kind of through line. It's like, wow, all of these people are really stuck on their offer, or all of these people are really fearful about getting behind a microphone and impromptu conversation. Really weird. And I don't know if that's an energy they feed off each other. It's just the way God designs these experiences. But I can totally see the value now in the kickoff session. A part of the introductory process is like, what are you really excited about? What are you hoping to get out of this? And then what are you scared about? Like, what's holding you back? What are you hesitating about with this? Like, and then be able to address those sort of objections, not to the sale, they've already committed to the program, but to just kind of customize it that little bit and be able to audibly, or in a coaching care sort of like, hey, I know in week 1 you said you were scared about this and we're addressing it this week. Are you still fearful? Like, what I mean? It makes it feel much more custom, even though it's a crafted and refined workshop. So I'm sort of, I guess, affirming what you're saying. I'm thinking about it in real time as someone who's served a couple hundred people with these types of workshops. I can totally see the application. And then, going back to the beginner mindset, this is exactly how I launched the accelerator, was week by week, the first version, then the second version, we iterated from there and has continued to refine over time. So yeah, I haven't a follow-up question, but is there anything else with hopes and fears that you feel like you should get out here before we move on to some other tactical questions?
Yeah, I'll give you a few sort of pro level tips or whatever. I gave you like the high level, and that gives you whatever 80% of the value right there. You actually mentioned one of them. That was like a pro move. If you can pull the actual things people said into like a future session, you don't necessarily have to call it out like, hey, Tammy, I know you said this explicitly.
Yeah.
Although if you can, that's pretty cool. Like they'll be like, wow, like Dustin was paying attention. And you're like,
Yes.
well, I kind of used AI to pull that out and recommend which ones to bring it up. So I have the system. You can systematize moments of magic and it's just as authentic. It's just systematized, right?
Yeah.
So you can do things like that. That's really useful. I have two more. The other benefit, or another benefit, is when you have multiple people, and this actually might reinforce what you were talking about you kind of have people who have some similar thread throughout their journeys. When people hear other people struggling with things that they also struggle with, that builds community. That's going to build some even stronger sparks to like, oh, I need to reach out to Dustin because he had this thing and we didn't really talk about it on the call, but like I'm going to message him in the community right now because like that really resonated. I have that same problem, or whatever it may be. It just makes it more human and more connected.
Vulnerability is an extremely uniting action and emotion. And then, I think naturally then you get like, hey, like we're going to encourage people on the first call. You guys should connect one-on-one with someone on this call in the coming week. When people are vulnerable and transparent, it creates so much more connectivity within the whole group and then within individual, pairings. So I love that. So that's number 2, is sort of this vulnerability culture that you can create by asking this question. And then 3.
Yeah. And just to put another word to it, if people haven't heard, that's related to psychological safety. And that's a whole topic on its own. But it's vulnerability, psychological safety, that's a great way to start your program if people will engage with that. Really quick side note, you don't do hopes and fears as the host. You are in a different position I would not recommend anyone out here listening doing your hopes and fears for their program, because that's not the, I don't know how to articulate this properly, but if you're saying like, well, I'm a little nervous that people aren't going to show up on calls, or, whatever you're worried about.
Yeah. You don't want to
journey.
I see what you're saying now.
Yeah,
you want
don't
to
do
ask
it with
the
them.
group. You don't want to, it's like Dr. JJ from StoryBrand talks about this a lot. Like you can talk about your own failures, but you can only talk about it in a rearview mirror, right? You don't want to be like, oh, I also suck. Like, because you're the authority. This is not the time for you to talk about your hopes and fears, especially the fears. It's about getting people in the group to open up, and you're sitting there as a facilitator. You want to maintain your own credibility and authority and and not be
Yes.
like, I think you're all going to hate me and I actually don't know what I'm talking about. I can't believe you guys spent money on this. That's my fear. Yeah. So,
Yes. Well, I'll just be vulnerable for a moment and say, Joe, the same story I told about before, that's why I learned this. I tried doing it just in our one-on-one sessions with him. I'm like, that was not good. It was fine. It was fine. And especially Joe and I have a good relationship. So it wasn't like detrimental, but I'm
yeah,
like, oh yeah, never do this. So anyway, that was
that's
a
good.
lesson learned. And then the third thing is at the very end, this works in particular for either a bigger retreat, like a longer duration, or like a group coaching program. At the end or at the last session, bring these back. So hopefully you found some way to document it, whether they're turning in or sharing templates, or they just said it out loud, or they dropped it in the chat. Bring these back for your participants to reflect on. And then hopefully, if you've done your job well, they have now had at least some of the hopes come true, and some of the fears have been put to rest, or whatever you want to call it. And
Yep.
that's a really powerful way to get people to see the transformation that you, as the expert in the room, have delivered to them. And that makes for an even better testimonial, and like, what's your biggest takeaway at the end, and all these other things. So it's a really cool way to wrap up a program by actually highlighting for them with words they said versus how they feel now.
I love that. Yeah. We haven't been as systematic about capturing at the beginning and then reflecting at the end, but something we do that I think people might get value out of too. And I think again, this part came out partly out of Jake's experience in cohort. We didn't really have a great like close. It's kind of like, I mean, in the last session, we were still teaching, and it's like we're squeezing in as much transformation as we can. One thing we've done is give that a little breathing room, and we talk about on an individual basis. We let them articulate what was your biggest insight or takeaway or transformation. And then we, meaning me and oftentimes I have a co-coach, we will in our own words speak into them and say like, they'll say something and we may just affirm that, or we could totally be like, that's true. And I want to just speak truth into you and tell you, I've seen this amazing transformation in you. Or, hey, I know you were scared about this thing and I've seen you overcome that, plow through it. Look what you've done. And that's super helpful and affirming. And it's always true. But it also, then like people are really jazzed to give testimonials because you've spoken truth to them, and a lot of times held a mirror up that they couldn't articulate on their own. And so we give that space at the end of our programs now to sort of do that virtual circular, around the circle moment. And then naturally people in the chat will be affirming each other and like, yeah, you were super helpful with this for me. So I love that idea of leaving space for reflection. And if you have the hopes and fears at the beginning and you capture that, then it gives you a very tangible things to reflect back to individuals at the end. That's really cool.
Totally. That's beautiful. I don't even think I can take credit for all that, except maybe the recommendation to end strong. That was really good. Nice work.
Thank you. Yeah. We're figuring it out, man. It's like these things that maybe seem like details or nuances, they really do matter. And also true, you cannot possibly predict this, pre-plan for it. Like it does take doing the work to get clarity. And that's why I think this 10% thing is so important too. It's like, these are both true. You should have a 99% amazing experience and do the pro level when you're ready, Jake. The way I'll frame this question is, if I am a type A and I want to have everything perfectly scripted and I want to pre-plan everything, and like I'm not comfortable kind of like with spontaneity or like figuring it out as I go, like how do you address that? Because I'm sure you've had clients in corporate and in your entrepreneurial journey who would identify as like a perfectionist. And it's the fear of God when someone hears, oh, I got to like sell a 10% thing and then like deliver before it's like totally, polished. The reality is you have to do that, but speak to people and coach them through, like if that's their big fear, if that's their fear, like how do you address that with people?
Yeah. So a few things come to mind. First, you have what you need when you need it with this 10, 50, 99. So again, a lot of people think they need 99, but if you'll trust and believe me, you don't need 99. You only need 10%. You have everything you need. There's no need to be spontaneous or have spontaneity.
Yeah.
You have everything you need. Same with when you deliver. You will never be at 100%. So part of this is just accepting what is. Now, that's easier said than done.
Yes.
The best advice, and I've gotten feedback a few times on this, the best advice, and it came from just a throwaway comment I made to somebody. Maybe not totally throwaway, but just an off-the-cuff comment, was they were worried about, okay, well, I'm really nervous. I know I have a plan. You gave me a great plan. Like, there's no more work to be done, but like, I'm really nervous. What do I do? What if something happens? What if people ask me questions I'm not prepared for? And I said, look, you clearly care about your clients. And I'm assuming everybody listening here does too. You're not just trying to make a quick buck and like crank that like group coaching program wheel and make that big sweet pile of money that you can like dive into like whatever the duck, Scrooge McDuck.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's not anybody listening, I'm assuming here. So because you care, that will shine through with everything you do. I know you will have to get to a high ticket program. Most of you are thinking high ticket programs probably out there. You're already talking with them. You're already building relationships. They care about you. You care about them. In fact, that's why I said yes to your program, Dustin, is mostly because of the connection that we had. And I'm like, Dustin has my back. He cares. And, he's going to make sure that I'm taken care of. And because of that, if you stumble, if you make a mistake, if you're like, oh crap, I don't have my slides, or whatever, something happens, I'm like, no problem. Just like, what do we need to just walk us through? Or the people listening aren't going to care. They're going to give you so much grace. They're not even going to notice most of the time if you make a mistake, by the way. And here's the thing, if you do make a big mistake, guess what? People will love you for it, assuming you've done the relationship building and they care, because they now know that they don't have to be perfect either. There's actually a negative if you're super polished and like super dialed in a way that's like so tightly structured that it feels like, ooh, I don't really want to get in here and get messy. Like, what if I make a mistake? It makes it harder for people to actually engage. So being like, I kind of ramble a lot of times, as people may or may not have noticed. I think I did a pretty good job today, but like this stuff that I'm doing right now, actually, I'm not doing it on purpose. I'm just kind of naturally doing it.
Yeah.
Are the things that people can people can resonate with. And it actually gives permission to be more human. And I think we need to be more human in the world, especially this day when so many people are online and they don't get to see people face to face very often. I mean, Zoom calls take you pretty far, but like, how do we make it as good as possible so being as human as possible? So I don't know if that completely assuages everybody's fear, but that's, my kind of pep talk I would give to people is it's not as bad as you think. Go try it and you'll be pleasantly surprised. So just try to get through it and bias towards action. Just try. And I think you'll be pleasantly surprised.
Yeah, I can totally back that up. My wife jokes when I say this because she's like, is that positive or negative? But people, I hear very frequently, hey, if you can do it, I think I can do it too. It's like,
yes.
What are you really saying here? But, the idea is I'm pretty unpolished. I'm kind of like, see what you get. My number one value is transparency. I'm like, hey, I screwed up, or hey, this is not working the way I thought it would. I've had plenty of calls where I'm delivering and I'm in a hotel and the Wi-Fi is really, really bad, or I one time I launched an AI tool I was super excited about. I'm like, you guys are going to love this. And then everyone tried to access it at once. It didn't work at all. And I'm like, well, that's embarrassing, but people have grace. They laugh and they're like, they just like you more because it's just a very human thing. Right. And it gives them, like you just said, I'm helping people in many cases do coaching or do consulting in their area of expertise. But people love the fact that you can go with 10% and it doesn't have to be perfect and you can figure things out. And especially in my specific thing I'm helping people with, podcast guesting is one of the biggest fears that people have is like, ooh, I can literally speak in front of a conference of 500 people. I'm cool because it's my keynote. I know what I'm going to say. You're going to put a microphone in front of me and this other person, and they're going to ask me kind of anything. And this idea of an impromptu conversation really scares the heck out of people. Until they experience and they realize this person actually wants you to look good. People love the nuance. They like it when you say, people are fine if you say, I lost my train of thought. Like these things that we have as fears are actually endearing because they're human to human. So I love that answer. I have one kind of final practical question and we'll kind of close up, obviously talking about how people can go deeper with you. I think most people listening would fall into a camp when they say workshop in their business. Probably a pretty even split of like one-time workshops versus ongoing workshops, which is how you're characterizing like a group coaching program as an example. Is there like differences there in like how you think about those, design those, 10, 50, 99 them? I guess we're going to use that as a verb. Talk to us a little bit more about one-time things versus recurring or ongoing things. When I say things, workshops. So like, how should people think about a one-off experience versus a recurring experience with the same group of people over time, I guess is the way I'd ask that question more clearly.
Yeah, so I'll answer it. And if I'm not quite getting the nuance, let me know. I'm happy to tighten it up. So let me start with the group coaching program. I think about it in its entirety first. So what is the overall promise? And then each constituent part has its own outcome or promise, if you want to call it that. And I actually design like a retreat the same way, maybe not a 90-minute workshop that might be too small, But like a retreat, if you have 2 days worth of activities, you're actually going to have like different modules, for lack of a better word, that will have their own outcomes for each as well. So it kind of, again, it kind of scales. It's kind of like a fractal a little bit. So that's kind of how I think about like a program that has multiple days. And the main difference with that would be I recommend having rituals. So if you have a group coaching program, 12 weeks, 90 minutes each week, start the same way, end the same way. And then maybe in the middle, it can change. That one, I think you should adapt to the material. Maybe you're talking less or talking more. And we didn't even get into this, but my recommendation is teach as little as possible and get them doing stuff as fast as possible. I just want to shove this pro tip in here real quick, because if they're actually doing something, they're going to ask better questions. And then those are going to be the really powerful teaching moments that you can get into that connect with a question someone actually has. But anyway, that's a whole nother topic. So you have kind of those rituals, but then a one-off. And then there's two kinds of one-offs. Let's say it's one-off from an audience perspective. That I would treat basically no difference. It's just like a 90-minute that you do every other week to get people in the door kind of thing. You design it, you iterate, whatever. Now, if it's a true one-off or like effectively a one-off, maybe you'll do it again next year. Frankly, I would still follow the same process. So here's a good example of the difference. If I'm doing something over and over, I will do as little work up front as possible because I'm testing things out. So I might be talking more, even though I said not to, for the first go around, and then turn that into a video, some of it that can be done outside so I can maximize that time together. If I'm just doing one time and I'm likely never doing it again, I might be doing a little bit more of that like pre-work or something, just use that specific example up front. But otherwise, the planning process is still the exact same. It's what are the outcomes that I want? What is the identity? What is the experience I want them to have? And how do I best get them from point A to point B? It's basically still the same overall thought process.
You're still taking a 10, 50, 99 approach, but obviously if it's an ongoing group coaching program, you're just going to do that week by week by week. But what I picked up from that is when you have a recurring or ongoing series of workshops, there's got to be through lines. One big through line is you're driving towards the same outcome, but you have sub outcomes along the way for each of the individual sessions, and rituals. And I think rituals is really important whenever you're talking about a group coaching program or any sort of ongoing thing that you're building progress as you go. Because, well, I'll just say, I don't know why it works. I don't have the design background that you have, Jake, but I can say it really, really works. About halfway through the evolution of our accelerator program, I went from teaching most of the call and to basically a flipped classroom where it's basically watch this. And we boiled it down to the bare minimum. It's like, watch this 8-minute video. You have to watch this before our call on Wednesday. And by doing that, you're going to free us up to basically spend all our time on implementation, right? And so, and then we have a ritual. It's like wins of the week, any announcements. That only takes 10 minutes total. Now we have 50 minutes of a 1-hour call, and everyone's pre-educated on what they really need to know. I can give them the highlights for about 2 minutes, and then we go into workshop time. So everyone actually gets some progress, gets things done. And then we come back for the last 15 minutes. Way better questions because they've actually tried to build stuff and they're like, I got stuck on this, or I don't know what you meant by this. Way different experience than me teaching for 45 minutes and then 10 minutes of questions before they've actually done anything with it. So I'll just back up what you said and say, in practice, as someone who's been doing this for 3 years, night and day difference as far as that's our number one feedback now is I love the workshop time. Like people love to have 20 minutes to actually get stuff done on a call. And then I'm there in the chat. I'm able to support them. I would have presupposed, well, they don't want to be like 20 minutes on Zoom with their camera off. Like, who wants to do that? Like, they want me teaching. No, they don't. They want to be doing, and then they can actually get way better results and get way better questions answered. So, any reflections on that before we close out?
Yeah, no, that's completely right. And I'll actually inject one of my other phrases that I came up with recently, again, kind of just off the top of my head, talking to one of my other clients. And they were asking me, how do I actually help people transform? Like, what if they don't come and do the work? And I have young kids. I have a just turned 8-year-old and an almost 5-year-old. And it doesn't matter what I say, what I do. Like, I can't make anybody do anything. And that's true of your coaching program. And so the phrase I've been using is you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink, but you might be able to help them take a sip. And so that's why I love getting people to start doing something. It gets that, it breaks that friction and starts the momentum. So hopefully they can carry it forward. And then they start thinking about it and all these things that you just mentioned. So yeah, completely agree with everything you said.
I love that. So if you want to have an amazing experience, work with Jake. So we're going to tell them how to get a hold of you, Jake. But as a takeaway here, like if people say, I got to know more about this, I want some more Jake in my life, I need to go deeper, like what would be the next best step for everybody?
Yeah. So you can actually see how I work firsthand, and I'll help you figure out what your workshop why is what I call it. Like the why should anybody attend? Why does anybody care? And why are you doing it? In my workshop why sessions, this is a free 45-minute call with me one-on-one. It's a mini workshop. And you can go to workshopwhy.com. That's like the word WHY. So workshopwhy.com. And I will work with you to figure out what that first like kernel of your workshop is, that then everything else becomes easier once you have that promise really clear, basically. So you can get all that stuff there. And then I also mentioned the hopes and fears. That's part of my crash course. That's also at workshopwhy.com. So I only have one CTA, Dustin. I'm following your playbook.
Yeah, I'm like a proud papa over here. I'm like, this is a very clear, what a great domain. You get live time with Jake. And then if you're like, I may want that, but I also want the goods and want the templates and want it's all in one place. So workshop Y, W-Y or W-H-Y, workshopwhy.com. Is that right?
Yep. And you're very human. You made a little flub, but everybody loves you more for it. So we don't have to be perfect. Workshopwhy.com. Thanks, Dustin.
Yes, they're going to remember that call to action. And yeah, I hope everyone goes and takes advantage of that. I don't know how long Jake will offer free 45-minute sessions to go and discover your why for your next workshop. I think that's extremely generous and valuable. And so, yeah, definitely go to workshopwhy.com, hook up with Jake. I think once you identify the why, everything else becomes so much more clear. Like that's going to be such a leverage point for people to be able to do that and tap right into your design thinking brain and do it right the first time, so they don't have to struggle with it like I did for many years. So, Jake, you're a great friend, a huge expert on this topic. I'm really grateful. Workshopwhy.com. Thank you again for being here, my friend.
Yep. Thanks for having me, Dustin. This has been fun. Thanks.